Welcome to America's Heroes Group.
And welcome to America's Heroes Group, our roundtable and our partner, the Veterans Legislative Voice. Today is Saturday, May 6, 2023. May is Mental Health Awareness and Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. Our host is Cliff Kelley. You heard him at the top. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, filling in as Titus today, doing a great job. He's also a studio engineer. Our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Arnold Productions. And we have, once again, Stephanie Kalota, our partner, U.S. Army Reserve Sergeant First Class, veteran, and founder and creator of the Veterans Legislative Voice. We're going to talk about the debt ceiling. If it's not raised, then how will it directly affect veteran services and programs? We're going to talk about that and see what happens. How you doing, Stephanie?
I'm doing all right. Try not to stress out about this, and I'm sure I'm not alone.
And I'm not stressing out about it because I believe that things will, once again, as this show too passes, we've been through this road many, many times in the past, although a lot more is at stake, it seems, because the money's bigger. We're in the middle of well, some people say a recession, but we're in the middle of a very big inflationary period, and this could have dramatic effects in this particular economic situation we have in our country right now and around the world. So tell us, how is this going to affect veterans programs and the VA directly?
Well, there's a lot of questions on that. So everything is really surrounding a congressional bill that has passed the House, and it's really being headlined by Representative McCarthy, and it's called the Limit, Save, Grow Act of 2023. And it talks about, and it's basically providing what says, provide a reasonable increase to the debt ceiling and other purposes, which is also a whole lot of cuts to tax credits, to government spending, more specifically discretionary spending, which is for you military out there. It's kind of like a nice to have option, spending that people might know that term for. And that's really what is bringing a lot of people into this game of chicken, because the Republicans had pushed this through the House, and it basically strips a lot of the things that Biden and his administration has gotten to pass, or at least improved on, and it rescinds a whole lot of it. And the Democrats do not want to budge on this. They're not willing to go along with this bill, and it most likely wouldn't even come to a vote in the Senate. And it's very scary because the money should be running out by June 1st. 4 days before my birthday. I'm so excited for that. And the country can default. And when a country defaults, a lot of really scary things can happen, because when the government can't pay their bills, they can't pay Social Security checks. They can't pay VA disability checks. They wouldn't even be able to borrow anything, because right now, for the past 5 months and some change, the Treasury Department has been borrowing, which isn't a good thing, because they are also charged anywhere from 0.6% to 5% fees on top of the money they're borrowing. So we're actually spending more money going through this debacle than anything.
But keep in mind that the Treasury borrows money this in general anyway, even without a debt crisis. I mean, that's how the government works. They issue treasuries and bonds, long-term, short-term treasuries, and overnight cash, banknotes, in order to stay going. However, you bring up a very important point. The fact that we're adding more debt and we're not paying on the debt can have dramatic effects on the ability to keep bond prices in line. Because if we default on our debt, bond prices could really take a beating, and that's going to be very scary right now. The bond market is what determines your interest rates and your credit cards, your loans. It determines all these different types of things that happen in the economy. It's the thing that most directly affects the everyday average American. If the bond market is jacked up, then spending is going to be jacked up in your household. Then to keep it short. So this is it's kind of an egregious tactic. We talked about this in the past, where you're using essentially the financial stability of the economy and the everyday American as hostage in order to get something done. Now, the problem is, and I'm going to get into this a little bit further, the Republicans want to make these cuts. And the article that you brought, we talked about on the VA website, the news.va.gov, have a couple of bones to pick with that. But that talks about 22% reduction in spending to the VA. So what are some of the programs and things that they're talking about cutting out, that the Republicans want to cut out? And I'm bringing the issue up because this is mainly a Republican issue. They want to bring these cuts into play.
Right. Okay, so there's a lot of things going on with the bill that I mentioned. The thing is that the bill does not specifically state where the discretionary spending limits are applied to. It does not state that so-and-so such is applied to defense spending, to the VA, to Department of the Interior, what have you. The Biden administration had to do a little bit of math for us. And so they broke it down is that, just imagine it's 1.4, trillion, I think, or no, that's the spending limits, but it's a lot of money. About 40% of the discretionary spending is for defense spending. And we know 9 times out of 10, the Republicans won't do cuts to that. So that gives us 60%. And with the percentage, and then with the rest of the money, that means they would basically have to double the cuts to non-defense spending areas, agencies. And that's where they come up with the 22% reduction rate. And so a lot of people have been fighting back and forth about that because it doesn't say in the bill that it's a specific cut to the VA, the Republicans are saying, we're not actually cutting the VA. Well, the thing is that they're not saying where they're cutting at all. And if they wanted to make sure that the VA or even the Department of Defense will not be applied to these spending limits, they should have written that in the bill, but they did not. And that's the scary part, is that they did not specifically say where the exceptions were. Because if they actually went along and went along and said where the spending limits are, that's more fuel for the fire for the next election that's happening in 2024. So them being as vague as possible is a route that they're taking to make sure that they don't burn more bridges.
So what about the VA's website? Because the VA even has on their website talks about that there are specific things that the proposal, which they don't name names, which I thought was interesting, which I understand because of the VA, they can't really take sides. Biden has a bill out there to which he's already some of which is already in play, which increased a lot of VA spending. So VA spending last year was something like $260 billion. 2023 VA spending is about $300 billion. The defense budget is about $816 billion. Okay, we spend more money on the defense budget than China, Russia, North Korea, Canada combined. We spend more money on defense than the entire Western Hemisphere combined. We spend more money on defense than our 9 largest enemies combined. We spend more money on defense than the continent of Africa.
Yes.
But the thing of it is, they do not want to cut defense. They want to cut $30 billion out of the VA budget, which, the article talks about, wait times for benefits being affected, honoring our military veterans, putting in more stipulations are making it a little bit more difficult for veterans to get honored at the national cemetery. So they're not building more cemeteries, which they need to do. They're taking that off the table. They're halt construction on cemeteries. Also cutting housing for veterans, housing, infrastructure, health care, things like that. So the issue that I have is whenever we talk about spending cuts, we always talk about the spending cuts when it comes to paying for the bill that's due, which is the veterans that spent their lives overseas, fighting for this country, coming back with all kinds of illnesses, toxic exposure. We got the PACT Act that was just passed. And by the way, we might as well bring that up. So their proposal, Limit, Save, Grow Act, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, says that might save $4.8 trillion. This is a Republican plan. It's going to save $4.8 trillion possibly over the next 10 years. It doesn't solve the problem. However, it does make a big dent in the budget deficit, which is an issue. We do need to tackle a budget deficit. We need to get ahead of that. But in that plan, canceling student debt. So discretionary spending, we talk about that. They want to cancel the student debt forgiveness plan. That's on the table. Yeah. Work around reducing, making work requirements for Medicaid. For somebody who's on Medicaid, you want to put in a work requirement. A person who's technically disabled, that's why they're on Medicaid, but you want them to work.
Well, they're actually increasing the age of pushing them, or basically, when you're in Medicaid on that certain program, you have to continuously show that you can't work or you're looking for work. And the current age limit for that is 50. This bill was to increase it, I believe, to 57 or 56. But I'm leaning towards 57. I can't find the actual number. So it would increase that age, which is frustrating because the Republicans have said multiple times that they're not going to touch the entitlement programs, Medicaid, Social Security, what have you. And they're already starting to work on this. And they blatantly say it out there. The other things that they do, like you said, they're rescinding a lot of things. One of them is the green tax credits that had been put in. So all of those really great things that we could be doing, getting greener cars, adding more things to our home and getting a tax rebate or a tax credit on that. But I thought Republicans loved tax cuts and giving more tax money back to the people. But now they're rescinding those. So it's really frustrating on how those things are happening.
To me, it's all hypocritical. I mean, the Republican idea or the theme of Republicans are great with tax cuts. That's not even. If you look at the data, it's not really accurate at all. That's just a myth.
No.
Both parties spend money, and both parties do this basically a lot of the same things. When we're talking about Democrats versus Republicans. People argue that Republicans are better on defense. Well, the last few years we've had more defense spending over with Democratic presidents, and we've done more defense-wise with Democratic presidents than we did with Republican presidents in the last maybe 20 years or so, since Reagan. Really.
Yeah.
That's reality. That's fact check. That's reality. But the problem I still have is the fact that we're basically jeopardizing physical responsibility of paying bills instead of having real conversations about things that do need to be addressed. I do believe that, yes, we need to get ahead of the budget deficit. That's something that's very important. It does make borrowing. When you have a huge deficit, it makes borrowing costs more expensive. The Federal Reserve is already raising rates like crazy. So you want to add more fuel to the fire by trying to default on debt?
Yeah, and it's going to lower the entire country's rating, credit rating too. And a lot of people took a hit when that happened to the U.S. in 2011. If anybody remembers that, because that crazy debacle. The other thing I think is a big
mind you, in that time we didn't default.
We did not default. We got close.
We came close. We didn't default, but we still took a beating. It's because of the mere threat of not having your bills paid on time. Standard & Poor's lowered the credit rating for the U.S. Treasury. It's the first time it ever happened in U.S. history.
Yes, and it's so crazy. It is so crazy. I lost my train of thought. It's the thing that I'm concerned about. I want to get your thoughts on this. Is that so? What are veterans supposed to do if we have the PACT Act? It's there right now. Yeah.
If we don't have the money to support all of these things, then how do veterans get the services and the things that they've actually paid for with their service and what's written through their contract, their social contract with America, to make sure that we take care of our veterans? Where are they left?
So, the number one thing, talk to your congressional elected official. No matter what side of the aisle they are on, let them know what the hell you're going through, because it is good for them to know what's going on with their own individual constituents. You're going to have issues no matter what side of the aisle you're going to be on, especially if they don't sit in a Veterans Affairs Committee, which frustrates me. I've heard veterans being told from their own elected officials, there's nothing we can do because I'm not in that committee. Well, no, that's not how things work. You go to the committee and you can get things working when you talk to them. You don't have to be part of the committee to actually get things done. It's really frustrating in that way. A good example is Representative Garcia from Houston. She wasn't part of the Armed Services Committee, but that was where Vanessa Guillen came from. And she died in the Fort Hood area. So she actually worked with the Armed Services Committees because of this to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And so, representatives and senators can work outside of their own assignment. So keep that in mind, everybody, and definitely talk to people. And if you have an issue with your elected official, go talk to the press, honestly, because they need to be put on blast of when they're not supporting veterans. One of the things that I really think is happening here that the Republicans are trying to make in a power move is that a lot of people think that Republicans stand behind veterans and they can take care of veterans. But we have a lot of evidence where that's not exactly true. I mean, the PACT Act is one of them, with that whole debacle with the Republicans deciding to vote against it at the last minute. So that's coming through. But since the PACT Act passed, and a lot of other bills that had really helped out veterans, like the Debra Sampson Act, a lot of the NDAs that's been coming out has been really improving things for veterans. If the Republicans can shorten and damage the relationship between Democrats and Biden within veterans, that actually will be a stronger play for them to make for next elections, because they can try to depend on the veterans to back them. And that was a power move that also happened under Obama, because Obama was trying to put and pass a lot of things to help veterans out. But then he had a lot of things come up in his administration that actually had really resulted from what Bush did. And so Obama lost a lot of his veterans base because of those things, that terrible long backlog of the VA disability claims, those type of things. Those things really screwed him over on his likability and is from the veterans. This is another thing that the Republicans are trying to do to hurt Biden's base with the veterans.
It's sad that we have to have shows like ours. They actually try to pierce through this political veil that they kind of distorts facts and gets people riled up on emotion, the pointing fingers. This person's trying to screw you over, that person's trying to screw you over. The reality is both parties need to work together to get something done.
Yes.
And so I don't necessarily. When at the end of the day, when the people need to think of it like this: at the end of the day, no matter who's in the White House and who's in Congress, if nothing's getting done and your services and things are not being met, the economy's not working the way it should be, you got to hold both parties accountable. Now, this is a Republican, goofball move. I mean, if you look at all the stuff that's in their bill or their proposal, none of this stuff is realistic. This is not realistic.
There's a few things that I agree with, and there's a few. They have the funding for that, unobligated and still money that's sitting from COVID-19, and actually the Inflation Reduction Act. Those unobligated funding, that bill would actually take those and try to pay back towards the debt.
Okay, I can agree with that.
That part I agree with.
I agree with that. Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's one of the smart things that they're doing. The other stuff,
the thing is like close to $1 trillion there, right off the bat, just by handling that part of it.
Yeah, tens of millions of dollars, they're saying. I haven't gotten an exact number, but they say tens of millions of dollars. Which to me, you know what? Do it. Because I used to be a budget person for the Army Reserve, and it was not fun. And I would move that money in a hurry. Yeah,
I think it was. I think at its height, it was close to $1 trillion, and some of that might have trickled down because we had talked about this before in previous conversations, like what is going on with this money. But then again, that was back in 2021, 2022, or before 2020, maybe early 2022. So who knows how much is left of that money and where it's been siphoned off to. But I agree with that. I mean, definitely do that. But when you spend, we have 1.8 million, 1.4. I'm sorry, 1.3 to 1.4 million, depending on what studies you look at. People in the military serving today. Now, we spend about $816 billion on defense. We spend more money on defense than anybody else in the world. We spend more money on defense than the largest countries in the world: Russia, China, Canada, France. Throw that in there. Brazil, throw that in there. North Korea, South Korea. All the 9 biggest GDPs in the world. We outspend them on defense. A lot of stuff we don't even really use. We're not even using a lot of the equipment that we develop. So we got about a minute left. So take us out. Tell us what do you want to leave everybody with, and as a final note.
Don't believe everybody that's saying what they're saying on a podium. Take everything as a grain of salt. Research it on your own, and always, always, always talk to your congressional elected officials. Let them know what the heck's going on so they can actually find out. Some of them won't even know the price of a gallon of milk if it wasn't for the constituents calling and yelling at them. It's that simple.
Stephanie Kalota, always a pleasure to have you on our show. You always bring us some good information, and this was a fiery one today, but we have to keep an eye on this, and hopefully, like I said, I'm optimistic. I don't think it'll kind of come down to a default, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's coming soon.
Okay, thank you so much, Sean.
All right. This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.